That's awesome. Let's talk more about moving. I would love to know like how you approach rounds. Like my kind of process is, all right, you got lock screen, you're trying to figure out maybe the country from the lock screen. I always try to
Yeah.
do kind of like a 360 pan, and then if I don't know the country, I don't know. I don't like to move really until I at least have a decent idea because when I move I
Yeah, yeah.
panic. So what's your strategy? What would you,
I definitely do
recommend?
the 360 pan as well. Mostly for me, that's because I'm trying to pick a direction to move in.
Okay. Cool.
Because in moving so much more than no move in NMPZ, time is your big commodity. It's
Yep.
can you get to
I
info
love that.
first? Can you find usable information and can you use it first? So it's all about being quick. Um, it's speed runs in sort of a live competitive form, really.
Hmm.
So generally, when I do a pan around, it's because I'm trying to pick a direction that I
Okay.
want to
And
go in.
what is the criteria? Like, what are you thinking about picking a direction? Because I've thought about that before too. It's like
Yeah,
it's so important to pick the best direction, but it's
yes.
kind of sometimes it can be tough.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of discussion in terms of moving and a lot of people say, oh, moving is just getting to signs and reading stuff. But it's more than that. There's a lot of decision making that goes into what route do you take and
Yeah.
how do you move. There's a few things that I generally follow. One sort of rule of thumb is I almost always will go downhill rather than uphill.
Yeah, I like that.
Um, Generally because when you're going uphill, like when you go downhill, you're traveling often into valleys where there's going to be more settlements, more information. There's almost always stuff at the bottom of the valley, whereas up at the hill, it might just be a lookout or something.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing is if I see signs, I'm going to go in the direction of signs. So
Yep.
I guess the main thing that when I'm picking a direction to go, it's always I'm trying to prioritize where I think will lead me to the most info. And there's some nuances of that. Like sometimes in Argentina, say, that's a really interesting one
Hmm.
because in in say urban Argentina in a small town somewhere out rurally, sometimes it's a better play to actually head out of the city onto a highway where
Yeah.
you're going to find signs that say distances rather than trying to look for an address within the city because addresses aren't that common in Argentina.
Okay.
So
It's
there's
great.
some real nuances that come into decision making of where to move to.
Hmm. Well, that's awesome about Argentina. Yeah, that's just so cool how the area you are is going to influence that decision making process for what you're
Yeah,
looking for.
I think a really important part of moving is knowing what kinds of information are available in what country. In the
Hmm.
Philippines, you're going to be looking for an address with a
Okay. Yep.
province. In Japan, unless you can read Japanese,
Hmm.
you could look for pole plates, you
Yep.
could look for road numbers, or you could look for area codes.
Yep.
Um, yeah, in Peru, for instance, sometimes you'll find province or the regions of Peru written on sort of political candidate advertisements.
Yeah.
Sometimes, not always, sometimes they're completely, or sometimes they're tiny little regions that you'd never have heard of, but sometimes they will have the region. So it'll say like Piura or Tumbes
Hmm.
or yeah, like those sorts of different regions.